Sujud As-Sahw, the prostration of forgetfulness. So the author says that Sujud As-Sahw, forgetfulness, is sanctioned, yani is made part of the religion for patching deficiency in the prayer. For patching deficiency in the prayer. Generally, yani, here's the broad rule, the general rule. Generally, for committing something prohibited in prayer or for abandoning something commanded to be done in prayer. For committing something prohibited in prayer, like an extra standing for a fifth rakat, or an extra bowing, yani bowing twice in one rakat, or an extra prostration, prostrating a third time in one rakat, or prostrating somewhere else in the prayer. Doesn't have to be in the rakat. Or sitting out of place, forgetfully, not on purpose. Because if you added any of those things on purpose, deliberately, it's going to invalidate your prayer. So you committed something prohibited in prayer forgetfully, not deliberately. Or for abandoning something commanded to be done in the prayer, like leaving out bowing, or standing, or prostrating, or an obligatory sitting, or an obligatory recitation, like Al-Fatiha, and then moving beyond its spot. There are two prostrations. Yani, those two are two prostrations. There are for Sujud As-Sahw two prostrations like those of the prayer. Like those of the prayer means all of the conditions of sujud, of the integral sujud, and even the recommendations of the integral sujud. Like what's a condition of the integral sujud? Like for your rear end to be higher than your head. So then these also are like that. And what's a recommendation of the integral sujud? To say Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. So then that's also a recommendation in these sujuds. And there are two of them, even if multiple issues warrant its performance. Yani, their performance. Those two. Even if multiple issues warrant their performance, you're only going to do two prostrations. It's not one prostration for each issue that warrants its performance, or two prostrations for each issue that warrants their performance. Yani, one or more thing that warrants sujudu sahw, for that you're just going to do two prostrations at the end of your prayer before the salam, as an optional part of the prayer, not as an obligation. So there are two prostrations like those of the prayer, those known integral prostrations of the prayer, even if multiple issues warrant their performance. And those two prostrations require an intention. Yani, you want to make sujudu sahw before you say the salam, you're going to intend to do this prostration, these two prostrations. When you do these two prostrations, your intention is the sujood of forgetfulness. Unlike the prostration of recitation in the prayer. Yani, if you prostrated for recitation, it doesn't require an intention. And those two prostrations are voluntary, like we said, not obligatory. Unlike the rectifications of Hajj. Unlike the rectifications of Hajj. So you've learned Hajj chapter before, inshallah. Don't you know that in the Hajj, if you leave out a wajib, or if you commit a prohibition, that there are some rectifications that you must do, you have to do, you can't not do them. You cannot not do them, you have to do them. Yeah, you know that. If you learned the chapter of Hajj. These two sujuds in the prayer for rectifying something in your prayer are not obligatory. You can skip those two sujuds. Unlike the rectifications of Hajj, you cannot skip those. In the school of As-Shafi'i, they are before the salam, whether for something added or subtracted. Whether you're doing them for something you added to the prayer or something you subtracted from the prayer forgetfully. Well, here, when we say for committing something prohibited, then it's going to be forgetfully. For abandoning something commanded to be done, could be on purpose. Doesn't have to be forgetfully. Here, forgetfully goes with this one. The sujood of sahw is sanctioned for patching deficiency in the prayer, generally for committing something prohibited in the prayer forgetfully, or for abandoning something commanded to be done, but not necessarily forgetfully. You might on purpose not do the first tashahhud that you were commanded to do. Or you might on purpose not do du'a'ul qunut that you were commanded to do. In the school of Ash-Shafi'i, these sujuds are before the salam, whether for something added, that's going to be forgetfully, or subtracted, might not be forgetfully. It might be on purpose that you left out something. Du'a'ul qunut or the first tashahhud, because that is the last of what was confirmed from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yani, doing those sujuds before the salam was the last of what was confirmed from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Meaning, other than that was confirmed from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the last of what was confirmed from him is that he did it before the salam. And doing it between the salams is abrogated. This is confirmed from the Prophet. Doing it between the salams, it is abrogated. The two sheikhs narrate that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed dhuhr. He stood after the first two rakats and did not sit. It means he didn't do first tashahhud. It was narrated that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he prayed dhuhr without doing first tashahhud. So the people stood with him until he completed the prayer and the people awaited his salam. He said a takbir while sitting, then prostrated twice before the salam. Then he said the salam. So that's a hadith of Al-Bukhari and Muslim. And just so that you know something about the format of this book here, if there is a hadith in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually said something, then usually we're going to put the Arabic text here. But if there's a hadith where one of the companions said, the Prophet did this, the Prophet used to do such and such, then I didn't put the Arabic. So like this right here is not his statement, it's a report of his action. So I didn't put the Arabic. If one says the salam deliberately while remembering the prostration, so he did something that warrants sujudu sahw, and then he got all the way to the end of his prayer, and now before saying the salam is the spot for prostrating twice, and he says the salam deliberately while he remembered that prostration, that means he skipped it on purpose, then he missed it. Now he can't go back to it. Or he said the salam while forgetting those two sujuds. Yani, he got to the end of his prayer, he wanted to do sujudu sahw, but he forgot, and then he said the salam, and then the gap was normally long. Yani, he said the salam, and then there was a long gap after that, a long time. Yani, let's say time. Then the time was normally long after the salam, and then he remembered, then he missed its spot. So, let me repeat. Someone has warrant to do sujudu sahw. Someone has warrant to do sujudu sahw for something he did in his prayer or something he left out of his prayer. And he got to the time to say the salam and he did not forget this sujud, but he still left it out and said the salam, then he missed its spot. Khalas. Or he did forget this sujud, so he said the salam, But then the time was long after he said the salam until he remembered that he wanted to do the sujud. Then he missed its spot. Or else he did not. And then he may still perform it and repeat his salam. Or he can leave it. Yani, if a person did something that warrants sujudu sahw, and then he forgot to do sujudu sahw. So he said, As-salamu alaykum to end his prayer. And then he remembered not after a long time, rather, he remembered after a short time. The time after his salam was normally short. Normally here means what's regarded as normal. That normally this is considered a short time, or normally this is considered a long time. It was normally short. He forgot to do the two sujuds, and then he said the salam, and then after a normally short time, he remembered that he did want to do the two sujuds. Then he may still perform them as if he never said his salam. Alright, so got a pronoun thing going on here. It, yani sujudu sahw as a type of thing. It says it means sujudu sahw as a type of thing that's two sujuds. If it says them, then means two sujuds. So the pronouns going back and forth. So if he had wanted to do sujudu sahw, and then he forgot, so he said the salam, and then after a short time he remembered, then he can still do those two sujuds as if he did not even say a salam. Just do the two sujuds and then repeat his salam. Or if he wants, he can leave it out. Yani he remembered after a short time, and now he has permission to do the sujud of forgetfulness. He can still leave it out if he wants to, since he didn't set the salam now. One would either leave out an integral or a component or a form. So before that, now what have we covered so far? We know that if you add something, it needs to be forgetfully, or else you're going to invalidate your prayer anyway. If you leave out something, then depends on what you left out. And that's what we want to see now. One would either leave out an integral. That's going to have to be forgetfully. Because if you leave out the integral on purpose, you invalidate your prayer. Or he would leave out a component. We're going to see what the components are. They're coming. Or he would leave out a form, a hay'ah, of an obligatory or a voluntary prayer. What are those hay'at? The hay'ah is, there's 15 of them. They include reciting loud or reciting low, lifting your finger, raising your hands, saying takbir, putting your hands between your chest and your navel, sitting in iftirash or tawarruk. All of those are forms. Hay'at. We covered that before. Review your lessons. We covered the hay'at in level 1 and level 2. Now we're in level 3. You got to level 3 without taking a test. Subhanallah. Okay. So, one would either leave out an integral. If he were to leave something out, it would be an integral, which would have to be because he forgot, or else it's going to invalidate his prayer, or a component. I'm going to list them for you in a moment, inshallah, or a form. You learned those in levels 1 and 2, so review, of an obligatory or voluntary prayer. Yani, even if it's voluntary prayer, this rule still applies, of sujudu sahw. And one would either doubt he missed something, or he would remember. Sometimes you doubt, did I miss something? You're not sure. And sometimes you're sure. That means you remember. You did miss something. And that would either be before the salam or afterwards. It is insufficient for replacing an integral, sujudu sahw. Sujudu Sahw is insufficient for replacing an integral unperformed deliberately. An integral unperformed deliberately, which invalidates the prayer for toying with it. Not performing the integral deliberately invalidates the prayer because you're toying with the prayer. So Sujudu Sahw won't patch that. Your prayer is invalid. Or an unperformed integral forgetfully. An integral unperformed forgetfully. Sujudu Sahw is insufficient for replacing an integral unperformed forgetfully. Doesn't replace it. With the meaning that you still have to do it. You have to go back to it. You can't just rely on Sujudu Sahw for what you missed when it comes to an integral and not fulfill that integral. When one remembers that integral before getting to the same integral in the next rakat and considering what he did between as cancelled, he immediately returns to that integral by merely remembering. Okay. When one remembers an integral that he left out, before getting to the same integral in the next rakat, like ruku', he remembers a ruku' that he missed before he gets to the ruku' of the next rak'ah. And if he were to get to the ruku' of the next rak'ah, he's going to consider everything that he did in between as canceled. But if he remembers before he gets to the same integral in the next rak'ah, then what does he do? He immediately returns to it by merely remembering. He immediately returns to that by merely remembering. As soon as he remembers that he missed an integral in his prayer, and he did not yet get to that same position in the next rakat, then he stops whatever he is in and he goes to that position that he missed for sure. And he continues from there. And important mas'ala here, if he procrastinates, his prayer is invalidated. And if he procrastinates, his prayer is invalidated, except doubting about the Fatiha while standing. Meaning, a person, for example, is in sujud, and then he remembers that he did not bow. So what does he do? Immediately, he must stand up and then bow. If he procrastinates, his prayer will be invalidated because he will be then putting the whatever move he's in the wrong spot. If he procrastinates, his prayer will be invalidated because at that point, the point where he remembered and he still didn't move to get to the right spot, he will be then putting a position in the wrong spot, and then that's going to invalidate his prayer. Except doubting about the Fatiha while standing. There should be something here. And doubting is like remembering, period. And doubting is like remembering. So let me read that again for you. When someone remembers an integral unperformed, it here means an integral unperformed, before getting to the same integral in the next rakat, then he immediately returns to it, that unperformed integral that he remembers, by merely remembering, and he continues from there. And doubting is like remembering. What does that mean? Doubting is like remembering. Very important. So let's say he's in ruku'. Let's say he's in sujud. He's in sujud, and then he doubts if he made ruku'. If he's in sujud and he doubts he made ruku', that's like remembering that he did not make ruku'. Doubting if he did make ruku' is like remembering that he did not make ruku'. That's the meaning of doubting is like remembering. So what do you do if you remember? If you remember, you immediately return to whatever you missed by merely remembering. Immediately. If you remember, you immediately return to what you missed. And doubting is like remembering. Doubting that you did the position is like remembering that you didn't. So then, what do? Same rule. You immediately return to that position. And then, if you procrastinate, your prayer is invalidated, even for the doubt, because doubting is like remembering. If you procrastinate there, then your prayer is invalidated. So, for example, you're praying, you're in sujud, and then you're doubting, did I make ruku'? So what must you do here by this doubt? You must immediately stand up and bow. And if you procrastinate here, then your prayer is invalidated, because doubting is like remembering. And if you were to remember that while you're in sujud, you didn't make ruku' and you stayed in sujud, then that would be you putting the wrong position or putting a position in the wrong spot. And that's going to invalidate your prayer. So you must immediately stand in this scenario I'm giving you. This scenario is you missed ruku'. Then you'd have to immediately stand to make ruku', except doubting about the Fatiha while standing. If you doubted about the Fatiha while standing, and then you paused right there, and you tried to think, this will not invalidate your prayer because you're still in the position of the Fatiha. You're still in the Fatiha's position. So your hesitation at that point will not invalidate the prayer because you're not putting something in the wrong position. Thus, if while bowing one doubted if he recited, if while bowing, making ruku', one doubted if he recited, or while prostrating, he doubted if he bowed, then he immediately stands. In both those cases. If while bowing, one doubted if he recited, then he has to stand up and then recite. Or if while prostrating, he doubted if he bowed, then he has to stand up and then bend over for bowing. So if while bowing, one doubted if he recited, or while prostrating, he doubted if he bowed, then he immediately stands. It's just in the first case, he's going to stand to recite, and in the second case, he's going to stand to bow. Also, if someone remembered while standing for the second rakat, this is a very particular case here. If someone remembered while standing for the second rakat that he did not do the second prostration, very specific. He remembered while standing for the second rakat that he did not do the second prostration for the first rakat, nor did he sit before standing, then he must not prostrate from his standing position. Yani, we're saying, he remembered while standing that he did not do the second sujud, nor did he do the sitting that's between the two sujuds. So in his standing position here, does he just go down the sujud? No. He must not prostrate from his standing position. Rather, he sits with serenity. Yani, he's going to sit and then pause, make tuma'nina, and then prostrate. And then one prostrates for forgetfulness before the salam. Is there any questions so far? Because I feel like I'm running through this. There's a lot of details here. Any questions so far?
Right?
Yes.
While he's standing, he forgot Surah Al-Fatiha. It was additional surah. While reciting, if he remembers, he has to go back and read Surah Al-Fatiha, correct?
Correct.
Barakallahu fikum.
Ameen wa fikum. And we're saying here, in this case, if he just hesitated to think, then he's not going to invalidate his prayer. Because he's standing, and that is the position for the Fatiha. So if he paused here to think and tried to remember what's his case, he's not accepting to put a position out of place. So his prayer is not going to be invalidated.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So what does one do when they know they have invalidated their prayers, but not know how much or what prayers they invalidated by not implementing this rule?
And then he makes up as many prayers as he's sure that he invalidated. And then it's sunnah for him to do more makeups.
Okay. Barakallahu feek.
Ameen wa fikum. Okay, so I think this is all clear. So let's continue. If one says the salam and then he stands, yani, because if he said salam means he's considering he's done with his prayer. So then he stands up and he even turns from his qibla and he might even speak a little bit and he might even leave the masjid. And then he remembers, not doubts, according to the correct madhab. According to the correct madhab, doubt does not apply here, only remembering. After saying the salam, doubt does not apply. Doubt has no effect after saying the salam. That's the correct madhab. So here we're saying he remembers only after the salam. Up top, we said doubting is like remembering. That's when you're still inside the prayer. Before the salam, let's say. Before the salam, doubting is like remembering. But after the salam, doubting has no effect according to the correct madhab. So if one says the salam and then stands and turns from the qibla and speaks a little, and even if he left the masjid, but then he remembers about other than the intention or the takbir of consecration, yani takbiratul ihram, he remembers, not doubts, about other than the intention or the takbir, meaning he remembers that he left out something, and not just he doubts only, he remembers. The doubt after the salam has no effect according to the correct madhab about other than the intention or the takbir of ihram. So this is yani, a lot of knowledge compacted. This is compacted. I'm going to unravel it for you, inshallah. So here, not doubts according to the correct madhab about other than the intention or the takbir of consecration. I'm going to come back to that. Squeezed in there like that to keep the sentence flowing. So what I had here to put this together is I'm drawing from numerous sources. And yani, because I have a computer, I'm able to just insert things in between. Much easier than having a paper and then rewriting. So I can just insert the things in between and I can shift things around. So, and also I'm trying to shave down a lot of information too, to make it brief and concise for you. So I'm going to come back to this sentence here. If one says the salam, and then he stands and turns from the qibla and he speaks a little, and even if he left the masjid, but then he remembers normally soon. You know what normally soon means. Yani, not a long time, normally, without stepping in filth also. This person, he said the salam and then he remembers he left something out. He said the salam and he might have stood and he might have turned from the qibla, he might have spoken, he might have even left the masjid, but not stepped in najasa though. If he stepped in najasa, and it's not going to work. So he said the salam and then he turned from his qibla and he spoke, for example. And then he remembered, not after a long time, only after a short time. He remembered after a short time and he never stepped in any najasa. Then he faces the qibla. If he turned away from it, he just turns back to it. And he goes back to the integral he left. He doesn't need a new takbir and he doesn't need a new intention. And he continues from there because everything after what was abandoned is voided. And by the time being short, one is still in the sanctity of the prayer. Yani, he said the salam and then he remembered shortly after that salam that he left out something. He's still in the sanctity of the prayer actually. So he can just face the qibla if he turned away from it and complete his prayer from wherever he left something out, the integral. From wherever he left out an integral. and he doesn't need a new intention. This is because the Prophet ﷺ said the salam after only 2 rak'ats of a fourfold prayer. So Dhul Yadayn said, was the prayer shortened or did you forget, O Messenger of Allah? Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He said, I did not forget and it was not shortened. Here I didn't put the Arabic just because so brief. He said, Lam ansa wa lam tuqsar. I did not forget and it was not shortened. Then he asked his companions and they verified for him. Abu Bakr and Umar, he asked them. He said, is it like Dhul Yadayn said? And they verified it for him. And very important here, thereby reminding him he didn't just take their word for it. That's very important here. It's not that he had no recollection whatsoever, and then he asked his companions and they said, yeah, what he said is true, and then without any recollection, the Prophet ﷺ then returned to complete what remained of his prayer. No. They reminded him, they made him remember. That's a very important detail there. If the time were long, though, he must restart because the format of the prayer was altered. He has to start from the beginning. And here, what about the doubt after the salam? The doubt after the salam has no effect according to the correct madhab if that doubt is about other than the intention or the takbiratul ihram. Because if after you say the salam you doubt if you made a right intention, you need to repeat your prayer. Or after you said the salam you doubt if you did the takbiratul ihram, you need to repeat that prayer. Those are the cases when the doubt has an effect after the salam. Quantify those cases there. The doubt after the salam only has an effect if you're doubting about your initial intention or you're doubting about your takbiratul ihram. Otherwise, if you said the salam and then you doubted, this doubt has no effect according to the correct madhab, meaning in the Shafi'i school. The correct madhab means the correct Shafi'i school. It is recommended that he prostrates for forgetfulness. Then this one who went back, who completed his prayer after the salam, it's recommended for him to prostrate for forgetfulness. This is still about integral. This is about integrals, so you know the integrals. And after the salam. This paragraph is about the integrals after the salam. Any question there?
Yes, Sheikh. Do you go
Yes.
back into the masjid or you just stay where you are, like you're outside on the street?
Just right where you are, just turn and face Qibla. But the rule is, as long as it's short time. If it's short time. But also a rule is what? You're still in the sanctity of the prayer. What's going to happen to your prayer if you take too many steps? It's going to invalidate your prayer.
Oh, okay. Totally understood now.
Sheikh?
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Sorry, I didn't understand this case that you're talking about where you just mentioned about how after the salam that you said you're still in the sanctity of the prayer and then you can continue on, like if you forgot something.
An integral. If you forgot an integral.
Okay.
So like here, it's demonstrated in the hadith. Here's the hadith. This is because the Prophet ﷺ said the salam after only 2 rak'ats of a fourfold prayer. That was Dhuhr or Asr. So Dhul Yadayn said, was the prayer shortened or did you forget, O Messenger of Allah? He said, that means he spoke even after he finished, after he said the salam, he spoke. He said, I did not forget and it was not shortened. That means he forgot. Because he thought he prayed 4. Then he asked his companions, Abu Bakr and Umar, and they verified for him that's what Dhul Yadayn said. And then he returned to complete what remained of his prayer. That means he just faced the Qibla and prayed 2 more rak'ats without starting over.
Okay, so in this scenario, say the prophet thought he had completed the prayer, but he hadn't.
Say again, please.
In this case, the prophet thought that alayhi salatu wasalam thought that he had completed the prayer, but he hadn't actually.
That's right.
Ah, okay. So the rule here you're saying is that, given all the other conditions you mentioned, is that you would just continue on from where you thought you had stopped, and
Yeah, as if
continue
you
on.
never said the salam.
Ah, okay, got it. Got it. Noted.
I mean, wafikum. That's what it means to say he's still in the sanctity of the prayer, as if he never said the salam. As long as the time wasn't long. And even if he turns from the Qibla, and even if he spoke a little, and even if he left the masjid, but without stepping in najasa. If you doubt about the takbir of ihram or the intention, do you redo the whole prayer? Yes, you would have to, because what we're saying is, you said salam, and then you doubted about the intention, so then there's nothing you can do here but do the whole prayer over again, because the intention is at the very beginning. Or you doubted about the takbir of ihram, so there's nothing you can do here but do the entire prayer over again, because that's at the very beginning. You said if one has constant doubt in the prayer, like one made one sujud or two, or did he read tashahhud properly or not, can he ignore it with the purpose of ignoring waswas? Not in the Shafi'i school. In the Shafi'i school, doubting is like remembering. But there's something else though, because there's something a lot of times when I talk to someone who has waswas. Look at your question here. You said, can he ignore it with the purpose of ignoring waswas? Is it waswas? If he knows it's waswas, then he knows what the issue is. That means it's not really a doubt. It means it's the haunting of the devil. A lot of times people have waswas. They know it's waswas, but for some reason, they can't ignore it. They know that this is whispers of the devil, but they can't find it in themselves to ignore what they know is the whispers of the devil. So if you know it's the whispers of the devil, it means you're not really doubting. This prostration patches the component that's abandoned forgetfully without difference in opinion. Without difference in opinion about abandoning it forgetfully. What if you leave it out on purpose? Can you still do this sujud? That's a place of difference in opinion. If you leave it out on purpose, can you still do sujud? That is an issue of difference in opinion. But if you left it out, the component, which I'm going to tell you what they are, forgetfully, then this sujud does patch that one without difference in opinion. It is forbidden to return to a component after reaching an integral, because it is forbidden to interrupt the obligation for something optional. The components are optional parts of the prayer. The ab'al. So once you went past that, like, we're going to say what they are right now. They are even part of the obligatory wording of the last tashahhud in the first tashahhud. What? Even part of the obligatory wording of the last tashahhud in the first tashahhud, meaning there's a first tashahhud, you know that. There's a last tashahhud, you know that. The first tashahhud is sunnah, you know that. The last tashahhud is obligatory, you know that. And this last tashahhud that's obligatory, it has obligatory words. So those words that are obligatory in that last tashahhud, you want to say those in your first tashahhud, but it's not obligatory there. The first tashahhud, which is optional, you want to say there the obligatory wording of the last tashahhud. The wording of the last tashahhud that's obligatory there. You want to say it in the first tashahhud optionally. So leaving out even part of that obligatory wording, not the recommended wording, warrants sujudu sahw. So the first tashahhud is the first component in our list. First tashahhud is the first component in our list here. Component, ba'd. That means it's a sunnah part of the prayer that if you leave it out, it warrants sujudu sahu. Because the two sheikhs narrated through Abdullah ibn Buhayna that the Prophet ﷺ left out the first tashahhud forgetfully, so he prostrated before the salam. Sitting for that tashahhud, that's the second component. Though leaving out this sitting dictates leaving out that tashahhud itself, because they go together. Because if the prostration is sanctioned for the tashahhud itself, it would be also sanctioned for the sitting for that tashahhud, because sitting for that tashahhud is something sought to do. So this confuses the beginners, like myself when I first learned this. I didn't understand. They say, Nani, let me just list them for you first before I read all the details. I'll list and then I'll read. The first tashahhud. Sitting for the first tashahhud. The dua supplication. Standing for the dua supplication, for the kunut supplication. Sorry. The kunut supplication. And standing for the kunut supplication. And prayer for the Prophet after the first tashahhud. And prayer for the Prophet's family after the second tashahhud. Those are the components that warrant sujudu sahu. First tashahhud, sitting for the first tashahhud. Dua al-kunut, standing for dua al-kunut. Prayer for the Prophet after the first tashahhud. Prayer for the Prophet's family after the second tashahhud. Book of Prayer level 3. If you're just learning obligatory knowledge, just probably have your head spinning. You have to know you have to know these things to be able to follow here. Okay, so this would confuse beginner here, like myself when I first was learning this, because I didn't understand. Leaving out the first tashahhud warrants sujudu sahu. Okay. Leaving out sitting for the first tashahhud also warrants sujudu sahu. Then I was like, I don't get it. If you don't sit for the first tashahhud, you're not going to say the first tashahhud. Yeah, that's right. I still don't get it. Think about it for a while. So it had to soak in for me. These are two different things. If you leave out the first tashahhud, it's possible to sit without doing the tashahhud. It's not possible to do the tashahhud without sitting. Leaving out the first tashahhud warrants sujudu sahu, and leaving out the sitting for the first tashahhud also warrants sujudu sahu. And leaving out even part of the kunut supplication at dawn, or in the witr prayer during the last half of Ramadan, warrants sujudu sahu, not leaving it out during a disaster. If you remember the lessons of dua al-kunut, you can do it after all obligatory prayers during a widespread disaster, like the Muslims are invaded, or like there's a plague, not COVID. This one, if you leave out that one after the obligatory prayers because of a widespread disaster, that does not warrant sujudu sahu. I'm skipping some words here for fear of overload. Prayer for the Prophet ﷺ after the first tashahhud. Prayer for the Prophet's family after the second tashahhud. Standing for the kunut, though leaving it out dictates leaving out the kunut. Yani same thing. Dua al-kunut is done from standing position. So if you don't keep standing, you're not going to do the dua al-kunut. Skipping that standing necessitates that you would skip the kunut. Still, those are two separate ones, so the scholars counted them separately.
Sheikh, right?
Yes?
Will you repeat the first component of at the beginning. I just a kind of, I didn't grasp that part.
Yes. So the first one, without details, is the first tashahhud. Leaving out the first tashahhud warrants sujudu sahw.
That one I understand. But why the part of obligatory wording of the last tashahhud, why it's added?
Yes. So the last tashahhud has, it is obligatory. And this last tashahhud that's obligatory, it has obligatory words.
Yes, indeed.
And it has optional words.
Mm-hmm.
So what warrants the sujudu sahw is leaving out what would be obligatory words in the last tashahhud in the first tashahhud.
Okay, barakallahu fikum.
Ameen wa fikum. Not the optional parts of the last tashahhud. If you don't do some optional words, for words that are optional in the last tashahhud, if you don't do them in the first tashahhud, that does not warrant sujudu sahw. So we have the first tashahhud, sitting for the first tashahhud, prayer for the Prophet after the first tashahhud, prayer for the Prophet's family after the second tashahhud, the dua supplication at dawn or in the witr prayer in the last half of Ramadan, standing for I keep saying dua supplication, the kunut supplication, and standing for the kunut. These six, that's what's in a lot of books. They said there's six components of the prayer. Six components of the prayer. Al-Basir adds something. Prayer for the Prophet and his family in the kunut. From what I have taken, this edition, I don't have it anywhere but in the book of Al-Basir. If an imam or a loner doubts how many rakats he did, he goes by the lower number because that is confirmed, even if he thinks it is most likely the higher number. He can't go by thinking it's most likely the higher number. He's doubting here. Doubting, what's the rule inside the prayer? Doubting is like remembering. So if he doubts how many rakats he did, it's like he remembers that he didn't do all of the rakats. So he goes by the lower number because that is confirmed. Even if he thinks, like he feels that probably he did do all of them, but he can't go by that. He has to just go by what's sure. And then he prostrates for forgetfulness. Muslim narrated the hadith. إِذَا شَكَّ أَحَدُكُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِ, when one of you doubts in his prayer, فَلَمْ يَدْرِ كَمْ صَلَّى, and thus did not remember how many he prayed, ثَلَاثًا أَمْ أَرْبَعًا, 3 or 4, فَلْيَطْرَحِ الشَّكَّ وَلْيَبْنِ عَلَى مَا اسْتَيْقَنَ, let him then toss the doubt and build on what is certain. ثُمَّ يَسْجُدُ سَجْدَتَيْنِ قَبْلَ أَنْ يُسَلِّمْ, then he prostrates twice before the salam. فَإِنْ كَانَ صَلَّى خَمْسًا, if that results in praying 5 rakats, شَفَعْنَ لَهُ صَلَاتَهُ, they intercede for the validity of his prayer. وَإِنْ كَانَ صَلَّى إِتْمَامًا لِأَرْبَعٍ, and if he completed his prayer by 4, كَانَتَا تَرْغِيمًا لِلشَّيْطَانِ, they are in defiance of the devil. Yani, they make the devil furious because he wanted to invalidate your prayer. He wanted you to invalidate your prayer. So if you pray 1 more rakat, if it turns out that it actually was the 4th one, then this infuriates the devil. And if it happens that you pray the 5th one, your prayer is still valid. And ijtihad is useless in this case. You don't make ijtihad, say, how many rakats I prayed? I think I've been praying now for 3 minutes. Must be 3 rakats. There's no ijtihad here. Ijtihad is useless in this case, as well as being informed by others, unless their reminder makes one remember, like the hadith of Dhul Yadayn. The Prophet didn't just take Dhul Yadayn's word for it and complete his prayer with no recollection. He did recall. A follower does not prostrate for his own forgetfulness. Yani, any forgetfulness that you incurred as a follower, the Imam's prayer will carry the burden for you there. If the follower missed a bow or a recitation, or he doubted about that, then he just stands after his Imam's salam and performs a rakat and does not prostrate for what he forgot while following. Does not prostrate for what he forgot while following. Because as long as he was following, then the Imam's prayer will carry the burden for him there. But he does prostrate for what he forgot after separating from the Imam. Yani, when he stood up to continue his prayer. The Imam said salam, and then he stood up to continue his prayer. And then he forgot something, then he can make sujudu sahu. But something that he forgot while following the Imam, he does not make sujudu sahu. If he joined the Imam in the last tashahhud, he must prostrate with him. He joined the Imam in the last tashahhud, and then the Imam made sujud. He was absent for the whole prayer, and he joined in the last tashahhud, and then the Imam made sujood sahu before the salam. He must prostrate with the Imam, except in some cases, like if it were clear for the follower that the Imam is mistaken. And finally, one should not return to a form. The forms are the sunnahs other than the components. Though doing so does not invalidate, like if he says Allahu Akbar to start his prayer. That's obligatory integral. Then there's the dua, وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِيَ لِلَّذِي فَطَرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. This dua is a form. Then there's another dua, أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. This dua is a form also. So what if he forgot the first dua and then he started أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ, and then he remembered that he forgot that dua, so he went back to it. He should not, but if he does, it does not invalidate his prayer. Nor should he prostrate for leaving it out because of its lack of being emphatic. Those forms, their lack of being emphatic, leaving them out does not warrant sujudu sahu because of their lack of being emphatic. Those components, though, they are more emphatic. First tashahhud, dua al-kunut. And for the lack of a report about prostrating for it. There is no report from the Prophet ﷺ that he made sujudu sahu because he didn't raise his hands, or because he didn't lift his finger, or because he didn't sit with his toes bent, or because he didn't put his hands between his chest and his navel. There's no report for the Prophet making sujud for any of these. And doing so, making sujudu sahu for leaving out a form, a hay'ah, invalidates the prayer for adding an integral, which is a sujud. Wallahu a'lam. Subhanallah. I knew that was going to be heavy. I don't know, maybe I might need to repeat that next week. Was too much information, too fast? How was that lesson for you?
Sheikh Raid,
Yes.
you said that if one forgot to do dua ul-iftitah, and then
Yes.
A'udhu Billah, he go
Yes.
back to dua ul-iftitah. Is that?
He does not go back to it.
Yeah, that he does not, because I misunderstood you. Okay.
Yeah, he does not go back to it. But if he did, it will not invalidate his prayer.
Okay, that was my question. If he did, it is not going to invalidate his salat.
Correct. And he does not make sujudu sahu for skipping one of those. And if he did, it will invalidate his prayer.
That's what I understood. Barakallahu fikum.
Ameen wa fikum.
Ameen.
Said that was heavy. Should repeat next week? Okay.
Yes, please. Good.
Yes? Okay. Inshallah ta'ala. Somebody pointed out a typo there. What was that? Ijtihad is useless, as well as being informed by others, unless their reminder makes one remember. Yes. Barakallahu feekum. Alright, well, let's stop there then, insha'Allah ta'ala, and we can repeat this next week, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. He said, prayer for the Prophet means to say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Yes. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.